This video will be exploring the poem called To Autumn by John Keats. So you'll need your Green Poetry Anthology, and as always we'll start with having a read through the poem. We recommend you read the poem 2 or 3 times to ensure you've got an understanding of the language and of the poem itself. For this poem, because it's a little bit longer, we recommend you do read it more than once. Okay, so To Autumn. Season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruit the vines that round the thatch eaves run, to bend with apples the mossed cottage trees, and fill all fruit with ripeness to the core, to swell the gourd and plump the hazel shells with a sweet kernel, to set budding more and still more later flowers for the bees, until they think warm days will never cease, for summer has overbrimmed their clammy cells. Who hath not seen thee oft amid thy store? Sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on a granary floor, thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind, or on a half-reaped furrow sound asleep, drowsed with the fume of poppies, while thy hook spares the next swath and all its twined flowers. And sometimes like a gleaner thou dost keep steady thy laden head across a brook, or by a cider press, with patient look, thou watchest the last oozings hours by hours. Where are the songs of spring? Ay, where are they? Think not of them, thou hast thy music too. While barred clouds bloom the soft dying day, and touch the stubble plains with rosy hue, then in a wailful choir the small gnats mourn, among the river sallows, borne aloft, or sinking as the light wind lives or dies. And full-grown lambs loud bleat from hilly bourne, hedge crickets sing, and now with treble soft, the red breast whistles from a garden croft, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies. Okay, so if you haven't already, you should set up your page in your anthology with our 3 boxes at the bottom of the poem. Obviously, this is a much longer poem than some of the others, so your boxes might be a little bit smaller. Alternatively, you can use post-it notes if you feel better using post-it notes. So the first box should say summary, the second box context, and finally structure and form. Step 2 then, bullet point these contextual notes in that second box. So John Keats is one of the key romantic poets. And remember, the romantic poets were concerned with nature and the arts and the beauty of these things. And this was quite a different approach to looking at the world. To Autumn reflects on mankind's relationship with this particular time of year. And finally, Keats wrote the poem inspired by a walk that he had taken through the countryside. So therefore, it's a personal response, making it an autobiographical poem because it's about his own experience. Remember to pause the video when you need a bit more time to add to your notes. Step 3 then, so bullet point the following in your summary box so that you've got an idea of the story and the message within the poem. So the speaker, who we know is Keats, was inspired by a walk through the countryside, and within that kind of journey, Keats paints 3 perfect autumnal landscapes through 3 separate stanzas. So the poem shows the transition from the beginning of autumn all the way through to the end of autumn. So 3 stanzas, 3 stages of autumn. The first stanza is that beginning, the middle stanza is the heart of autumn, and the final stanza is as the season begins to conclude or come to an end. The poem also personifies autumn to emphasize the beauty that it possesses, and it almost challenges the negative connotations that it has been known to possess. So this poem is a declaration of appreciation for autumn, and it's questioning why autumn isn't celebrated more or as much as other seasons such as summer. Okay, so we'll start working our way through the poem, making our notes of analysis. The first line then, seasons of mist and mellow fruitfulness. So it's important to note that the poem begins with the exclamatory sentence, and you can see that with the exclamation mark there. And this immediately introduces this tone, this positive tone of excitement and appreciation for the beginning of autumn. So it starts on a real positive. It's life-giving, it's vibrant, it's colourful, it's really positive. However, it's in a much more softer or subtle way than summer, because this fruitfulness is described to be quite mellow. A close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless. So the introduction of the personifying of autumn is here. So Keats personifies autumn as this human being. And in this particular example, he's personifying autumn as having this close relationship with the sun. So if you think of summer being the season that autumn overtakes from, it's as if autumn still has quite a close, quite a strong relationship with the sun from the summer, because it is still there in some way, it still exists. So this image shows that they're working together to offer the beauty and life that autumn does continue to offer. You'll also note as well that the sun is described as maturing, which again could be a reference to summer and how it's becoming more distant as autumn begins. So to bend with apples, the mossed cottage trees. So we've got some really rich imagery here. Keats is creating the image of heavy, ripe apples weighing down the trees, and it creates that sense of life. Autumn is still shown to contribute towards nature and offers aspects of autumn contributing to really rich food and nutrition and that development of the season. To swell the gourd and plump the hazel shells. So we've got the verbs swell and plump, and these verbs straight away are quite positive. They're dynamic and they have connotations of growth and sustenance, and that means that they are all about the nutrition and about the development. So really positive verbs. This shows the continued life that autumn can give, and that's supported there through the comparative more. So you'll notice that the word more is repeated quite a lot throughout the poem, and it's this idea that autumn as a season is giving more and more to life. You'll notice there are some definitions there at the bottom of the slide as well. Do define the words and add those onto your notes if you're not too sure about the words, or if you think you might forget their meaning. And still more, later flowers for the bees. So here we have that lovely repetition of more. again emphasising how much autumn has to give as a season. There is still some life left to give at the beginning of autumn. So even though it's the beginning, it's still the start of something. And then we have this image of summer overbrimming their clammy souls. So that verb overbrimmed shows that summer has fulfilled its purpose and it's transitioned into the beginning of autumn. So that overbrimmed creates the image of summer kind of overflowing, and it's finished with summer and now the sun is moving on to autumn. And it also creates an overlap really between the seasons, which again is natural, it happens. So moving on to the next stanza then, I would make a note at this point that the second stanza introduces the next stage of autumn, which is the heart of autumn, if you like, being central in the heart of the poem. Who hath not seen thee oft amid thy store? So we've got that rhetorical question that the speaker is asking, and that translates to who has not witnessed the wonders of autumn? So Keats, remember, holds autumn in really high regard, and he feels that it should be celebrated more as a season because it's often overlooked in comparison to other seasons such as summer and spring. So in this rhetorical question, Keats is really urging the reader to reflect on their own experiences of autumn and its beauty. People often don't realise the beauty that's around them, or they're not quite realising the positives that they experience within the season. We then have the description of thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind. So again, that's very sensory. Really beautiful image there of the wind. Obviously, we've got that alliteration, which is the repetition of the soft W sound, and that does create a calm, gentle atmosphere. That kind of suggests that autumn is quite nurturing, it's quite soothing, all through that really soft use of alliteration. The wind as well, that noun, shows that autumn has the beauty of that kind of change of weather as well. So it feels quite nice. There's quite a nice subtle breeze within autumn. Again, the image of the hair being lifted softly, it's described in quite a delicate way. It's quite a positive change of weather in autumn in comparison to the summer references that we had in the first stanza. I think we have the word clammy in the first stanza. So here we've got this nice real difference of how autumn and how the autumn weather is felt by the human being. Or on a half-reaped furrow sound asleep. So we've got more personification here. And remember, when we personify an object, it emphasizes its strength and its power as a concept. So Keats is continuing to personify autumn here as a female, as a woman, encouraging the reader to almost find her. In this instance, she can be found in the half-harvested hills in the countryside. So even in mid-autumn, there's evidence of produce and life that can be found. So he's really encouraging the reader to look around them and see what autumn offers. Drowsed with the fume of poppies. So again, we've got more imagery here that's quite calm and soothing by the smells of nature and the work of summer that is left behind in autumn. Okay, so moving on then, or by a cider press with patient look. So we've got the abstract noun there, patient, and the personification continues with autumn waiting, and it's waiting calmly and patiently for the fruits of summer to be turned into cider. So it's the idea that autumn is waiting for these things to happen, these things of beauty. Shows how delicate the season is, And again, just that personification there of autumn as a female figure. Thou watchest the last oozings, hours by hours. So we've got the idiophone of oozings because it acts like onomatopoeia. It creates the satisfying sound of how slowly cider is being pressed. It also shows that Keats intends on making the most of every moment in the season. So that's important here. You can see in that line how descriptive, how detailed. The use of onomatopoeia really makes the image come to life. Keats is really highlighting something that's quite mundane, something that just happens quite gradually. He's really exaggerating it here as a really beautiful concept. These lines as well also suggest that autumn, as this personified figure, as this female, is almost stepping back and patiently watching and admiring their own work. So moving on to the third stanza, again, do make a note that the separation of the final stanza, that reflects the final stage of autumn. And it starts with the question, where are the songs of spring? Where are they? So we have two rhetorical questions here, really beginning that stanza. And he's drawing comparisons here to spring. So what he's saying here is, where is spring now? Where are you? Because people regularly associate spring with new life, with little lambs bleating, with all of these real positive images. And Keats is questioning, where is spring now? He feels that autumn should be celebrated more because of its beauty, which often is overlooked. We have the description of while barred clouds bloom the soft dying day. So we've got this oxymoron with soft and dying. So Keats describes the growing darkness that the end of autumn brings as being quite soft. So it shows that the growing darkness is natural, it's inevitable, and it shouldn't be feared. So again, quite an interesting image because we have some more negative words emerging here, like dying. But once again, it's this appreciation of the fact that the season will inevitably come to an end. It will happen. It's okay because it will return next year. So that's why we have this oxymoron here, because it's gradually becoming darker. We're emerging into winter and you really get this sense of gradual change. But it's okay. It's not to be feared. And the speaker really does acknowledge that. Then in a wailful choir, the small gnats mourn. So we have this metaphor here of gnats. So they're like small fly creatures mourning to show the loss that even they feel for autumn leaving them. So this lovely image of the kind of the insects, the wildlife, the other elements of nature will miss autumn as well. Again, that reference to the wailful choir, you can almost hear that sound come alive, and it almost shows their sadness at losing such a beautiful part of their life. And finally then, we have the final few lines of the poem, and full-grown lambs loud bleat from hilly bourne. So again, we have the alliteration with lambs and loud, and that repetition of the al sound here emphasizes the vibrancy and the life that still remains in autumn. So even though these are our final few lines, even though this is our final stanza, even though these are our final stages of autumn, there's lots of lively imagery and sounds that come to life in these final few lines, because autumn itself is still thriving. There's still lots happening, and it's still this season of beauty. And you'll see there as well, if you just count the words in this stanza that are linked to sound, again, just to show that the season is still alive. So we have bleat, we have sing from the hedge crickets, the redbreast whistles, and we have the gathering swallows twittering in the skies. So that's a really nice thing to be aware of, that these final few lines are full of life, they're full of sound, it's dynamic, it's still very much alive. That final line then, the gathering swallows twitter in the skies. It's also worth noting that in addition to the reference to sound, there is a very clear semantic field of nature, from the creatures, birds, insects. So again, count through and maybe highlight or underline all the words that link to this semantic field of insects or creatures or anything living. And again, it's just to show that autumn has provided to nature. It's really made a positive contribution to the world. Step 5 then, the structure and form. So again, bullet point some of these notes in the structure box on your page. Now there's quite a lot here and some of it is quite high level. So remember, if you are a bit worried about the structural side of the poem, then the best way to remember this structure is that we have 3 stanzas representing 3 different stages of autumn. So stanza 1 is the beginning of autumn, stanza 2 is the heart of autumn, and stanza 3 is the ending or the conclusion of autumn as a season. However, the form of the poem is classed as an ode, which is kind of like a declaration or an appreciation of something. And this ode is praising this particular time of year, which is obviously autumn. It's the last of what has come to be known as Keats's Great Six Odes, all written in the same year, which were in 1819. So it was the last of his odes that he wrote. And interestingly, in some of his other odes, so similar poems to this, Keats used 10 lines in every stanza. However, here he uses 1 extra line. So at the time, in the same way, he's given the poem more interest, but it also links back to that word more. It links back to the fact that Keats believes autumn gives more and more and more. It's such a positive season. And then thinking about the rhythm of the poem, so it's in iambic pentameter. Although Keats does introduce a number of variations to ensure the poem never becomes mechanical and repetitive. And he does that again just to enhance that real richness of the season, the beauty of the season. So that concludes our analysis of John Keats's poem To Autumn. Please feel free to go back in the video and pause at key moments to add or develop your notes. And well done.